Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Margot J. Armstrong, also known as Jill to some of you. I'm a longtime EAR board member and part of EAR's programming committee. This evening, for a change, one of our presenters, Rosemary Brown, is going to present the land acknowledgement. So when she's introduced, she'll be doing that. In the meantime, on behalf of EAR and the EAR leadership team, I'd like to officially welcome you all to Affordability and Basic Income, which is a particularly timely topic at the moment. We're grateful to each one of you for choosing to spend your evening with us. So thank you very much for being here. This evening's talk is one of an ongoing series of EAR events called Umbrella Talks. EAR's primary purpose is to empower artists in Calgary and area to survive and thrive as artists. And these Umbrella Talks are one element of what we offer. Just 1 second. This, there, okay. Okay. There we go. I apologize for the technical glitch there. Okay. This year, EAR celebrates 16 years of service to the local arts community. And even though EAR has grown and evolved over that time, our mission has remained the same: to provide practical resources that help sustain the livelihood and practice of artists in the Calgary area. To achieve this, EAR offers monthly professional and personal development talks such as this one. Also a twice monthly online artist meetup through Facebook called Studio E, a wide variety of community resource information, which you can find on our website, elephantartistrelief.com. And it's also on the Studio E Facebook page. And of course, our core program of emergency financial relief for artists who find themselves in a crisis situation. As a charitable organization, we rely substantially on support from you, the public, in the form of volunteerism, membership, and especially fundraising to do what we do. You can help us by raising awareness about EAR, and if you can, please consider donating online. Our heartfelt thanks go out to all of those who have already supported EAR in the past in whatever form. The Society is 16 years young this year, and we are encouraging our supporters to contribute a monthly donation of $16 to mark this anniversary. Every dollar donated is allocated to providing relief for artists in times of need. Donations can be made at EAR's website, elephantartistrelief.com. Another way you can support EAR is by purchasing a yearly EAR membership. The money from memberships purchases go to our operations, which supports our admin expenses and also programs like the one you're watching right now. EAR memberships can also be purchased at elephantartistrelief.com. Just a couple more bits of housekeeping. Throughout the presentation, we ask that you keep your mics on mute, and also please turn off your cameras during most of the presentation. There will be a period where you'll be asked to participate in a discussion early on, and then later on when we do Q&A. But for the rest of the time, please keep your mics and cameras off. And please feel free to use the chat box to write your questions as they come up, and we will start a record of those for the Q&A portion of the evening. During our break, we'll also provide a link in the chat to a survey form. So please fill out the form to let us know what's important to you. Your input is extremely important to us too. It helps us determine how our programming evolves. So please take the time to do that when the survey appears in the chat. This evening, we will be hearing from Rosemary Brown, Wendy Benson, and Cynthia Macias from Basic Income Calgary and We're Together Ending Poverty, also known as WTEP. WTEP is a diverse grassroots group of activists who are working to educate and empower ourselves and others to take action on the root causes of poverty. We also want to create mutual mutually supportive relationships that encompass learning and sharing. We want to transcend practices of oppression in our relationships, and we welcome all who self-identify as women, trans, non-binary, or two-spirit. Basic Income Calgary is an action group of the Basic Income Canada Network and an Enough for All stakeholder. Basic Income Calgary's goals align with those of Enough for All and Calgary's poverty reduction strategy and the growing national movement for a basic income guarantee. We have welcomed these groups for an umbrella talk each November for the past few years. And over this past year, the stakes have ramped up to unprecedented levels, making their work more relevant than ever. So we brought them back to discuss their ongoing work and to address the current affordability crisis. And now, without further ado, I will pass you along to Rosemary Brown, who will be introducing herself and then passing us along to the other speakers. So enjoy the evening, everybody.
Thank you very much, Jill. So on behalf of We're Together Ending Poverty, I would like to welcome all of you to this evening's Basic Income Workshop. And also, I would like us to begin in a good way with a land acknowledgement. So WTEP wishes to acknowledge the land that sustains us and all life, and also the Indigenous people and their ancestors who first lived on this land. We understand that the relationship of Indigenous people to the land has been the basis of their culture and is one of stewardship and respect. It's all about living in relationship with the natural world around us and understanding our obligations as well as the gifts we receive from the land. European settler culture was based on very different ideas and values about the land. And as a result, we began a process of expropriating Indigenous lands for our own purposes and dispossessing Indigenous cultures. And so in the interest of truth, we feel it's important to talk about that. And we commit ourselves to working with other people to address this oppression, which we term in general as settler colonization, which is still ongoing today. We recognize that Mohkinstsis, which is the Blackfoot name for Calgary, is home to the ancestral nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai. It's also home to the other signatories of Treaty 7, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda nations of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney. As well, it is home to the Métis region, the Métis Nation districts 5 and 6. So thank you very much for that. I was going to talk about what WTEP was, but Jill's already done that, so I won't go over it again. What I'll do instead is move on to what the objectives of the workshop are. And what we want to do is spend some time in a sharing circle, gaining your perspectives on what challenges you're facing in meeting your basic needs. We also want to talk a bit about poverty, show some poverty stats, talk about income levels for artists within the context of intersectionality. We'd also like to go on to talk about, what is a basic income? Why do we need a basic income? What are the myths surrounding basic income? And then move on to the political arena and what's happening at the political level around basic income. We'll spend some time getting some information on housing affordability. And those are the objectives for the evening. And so I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia now, who will lead us in the sharing circle.
Thank you, Rosemary. So first of all, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for having us here. And I will introduce myself. My name is Cynthia Makis. I am a fourth-year student at Calgary University doing my social work. And at the moment, I'm doing my practicum with WTEP. And yeah, so I am really enjoying it. It's like I'm learning a lot, especially about like basic income, about affordable housing. So it's something that I'm becoming very passionate about. So I hope that I hope that this presentation will also touch you guys like I was touched on my first presentation. So we're going to start with sharing circle. So I'm just going to ask people to go around to just introduce themselves, to say their name, their pronouns. Sorry, my pronoun, she, her. I forgot to say that. So yeah, so just I'll just ask everybody to go around and introduce themselves, their name, pronouns, and also answer one question for us, which is, what are your challenges of meeting basic needs? So that is just, we're just asking for it to be just like a brief answer of yeah, just the challenges that that you're like challenges that you're having when it comes to basic needs. So let's see.
It would also it would also be nice when people speak if they could turn on their camera, and of course you'll have to unmute yourself as well.
Okay, I kept mine off because I have the flu and I look terrible, but there I am. Hi, so I'm Carolyn, and I am the programming lead for EAR's programming committee. I would say that my greatest challenge would be food affordability, the extraordinary expenses of food. That is my major challenge right now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Carol.
Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
My name is Gavin Soroshin. I am a musician here in Calgary, have been pretty much my whole life. And I suppose the needs are holistic. They would be food, they would be shelter, they would be probably anything you could think of. And the fact that art on a grand scale does not afford the luxury of one's subsistence.
True.
That is so true. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Who would like to go next?
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Arcadius, but you can call me Arky. I was just laid off last week, so I've been a long time subscriber of this newsletter. I was an artist back in the day, so I thought I'd just check this out and see what it's all about. And I think to echo what people have said previously, the price of food is just absolutely insane. So I'm lucky that I have my house, you know, I don't have a lot I need to worry about, but food is definitely one of those things that is getting a little bit out of control.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Anybody else? Okay, well, I'll go. My name is Margot. I have lived in Calgary for many years, and now I have actually had to relocate myself to Edmonton. When COVID started, I had a job, and then I lost the job, and I was on the government money, which was a real lifesaver. But then I got COVID. And then as I went through the different levels of government funding, I ended up on income support through Alberta Works, because I'm still dealing with long COVID 3 years later, and a worsening of an existing autoimmune disorder. And I ended up being reno-evicted, and I had to move to Edmonton because I literally could not find a place to live in Calgary. So that's my biggest thing. I'm exhausted, and still there's the problem with, you know, food. In Calgary, the food bank is actually very well supported. I'm not sure exactly on what levels. They do a lot of fundraising. They're a fairly well-funded food bank. Edmonton does not have that. Their food bank is entirely dependent on donations by people who provide to the food bank. From what I've been told, they receive no external funding. So I'm learning a lot about differences in cities. And for some reason, I assumed because Calgary's was funded that Edmonton's would be as well, but it's not. So there's sort of different levels of support in different places, but still, yeah, the affordability is out of control anywhere you go, I think, in this country.
Thank you, Margot, for having us. But yeah, I noticed a lot. Like I have a couple people who also moved to Edmonton just because of the affordability here. It's really sad. Yeah. And I think we have one more person that just got in. So I just want to let you know, right now we're going around sharing our name, introducing ourselves, sharing our names, and also we're answering the question of what are the challenges that we are coming across when it comes to basic income, like on our personal life. So whoever want to go next, you can just unmute yourself and go next.
Would anybody else like to share? No.
I can share.
Sure.
My name is Ezgi, and I am a new. Oh, wait, let me. Yes. My name is Ezgi, and my pronouns are she, her. She, her. I'm a newcomer artist and culture worker. And currently, I am struggling with a cracked window in my rented apartment, and my landlord just doesn't repair it since I think 7 months now, and it affects my heating. And because I am my lease is almost here, like in 2 months or so, and I am currently having a rent quite affordable, and I am anxious that I would lose the apartment, so I can't go to the Tenants Act and like the legal ways, because of the housing crisis right now in Calgary. I can't do anything with the cracked window in my bedroom, and it's affecting my sleep quality and everything, actually. Yeah, this is my struggle right now.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing. And I'm so sorry that you're going through that. Like, wow, I hope that things get, like this get, like the window get fixed and things get better.
Not only that, it's going to get very cold at some point. You may have to put the plastic up in the window. That's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that.
That is awful. Somebody else like to share?
I can go ahead and share. My name is Alberta, and I live in Calgary, and just echoing everything that everybody's been saying. I also just recently got a layoff, and yeah, just don't know what the future holds. So
It's scary. It's scary. I mean, when did we ever think that where we live that we would be saying things like that? We've been pretty lucky here for a long time. Let's say that.
This might sound really frivolous for people who don't have a place to live, but I'm just going to mention it because it's bothering me right now. A concert ticket, $700. Like, I think music, for me, it's been a huge part of my life and a part of my happiness, a part of my joy. And, I wanted to go see the Rolling Stones. I wanted to go see Bob Dylan. $700.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just mentioned that. Like, it's everything,
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the cost of living is just crazy. Is there anybody else who would like to share with us?
Well,
If it's on the topic that we're discussing right now, I think that these problems are systemic, and I think they come a lot from the political structure, and on a psychological level, we all, I mean, whatever your parents do or whatever they teach you is the way you tend to do business. And in the sphere of things, we have a whole managerial class that seems to be taking great advantage of the artistic space, yet our artists themselves are suffering. We have, like you said, tickets to the tune of $700, which just excludes a majority of people. And if we're talking about inclusion, this is a very exclusive venture that is being propagated, and I think it's governmental. I also think it boils down to some psychology that we are prone to. That if authority tells you how to think and how to speak and how to live, you're going to fall in line. And so, I've done a couple. I had up until last year. I did a podcast for 4 years, and I had Wendy Benson. Hi, Wendy. On the podcast, and another gentleman just recently. However, and I don't say this for either of their sakes, there is a mentality that is, although it propagates itself or explains itself as inclusionary, it seems it doesn't seem so to me. I think that if we're going to start talking about basic income, this is a grassroots venture. It is ground up. It is for the people. And I've talked to many artists. I mean, I've played music my whole life, and I've toured the world, and I've done some great work. I know a lot of the great musicians in this city, the curated musicians, I guess I could say, and they're all suffering. Each and every one of them is making $100 a weekend, where they used to make $600 a week back in 1972. So, and we know the price of cigarettes now is not a nickel, or the price of sustainability is not what it was in 1972. I think that these are governmental things. I also think that to put together some sort of understanding amongst the demos, by demos I just mean the people that this affects, which is really holistic. It includes not only races and nationalities, but just people, the demos in general. And so to do this, the word really needs to get out about the fact that it's okay that you're suffering. We want to know that you're suffering. We want to know how much you're suffering, and how can you be a part of your future where you're not dictated to by either government or by the systemic way life is propagated on a daily basis. So that's my thought.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Well said. If there's anybody else who would like to add something before we go into the next part.
Well, I guess you might as well move on to the next section. It's all good. We don't want you to feel obligated to share, but thanks to those of you who have.
Yes, thank you, everybody. So the next part, I'm just going to pass it on to Wendy.
I have to unmute before I share, and I go back to slide 1, so hang in there. Whoops. Okay, so this is just a very quick overview of what's poverty in Alberta for 2 adults and a 2-child family. Alberta Works in 2022 would provide $36,100. In 2022, the artist's beginning salary, and this is for a salaried position, not a gig, not gig work, would be $36,800. the market basket measure costs for that size of family is around $56,000 a year. So you can see there's easily a $19,000 gap between what Alberta Works is providing for a family versus the market basket measure and the costs. I also appreciate that as I tried to find 2023 data, how challenging it was because of the rapid inflation over the last year or year and a half. And I had to stop and say, okay, we just need to, I just need to keep this comparable to each other. But and so this just identifies how the kinds of problems that there are for Alberta Works, a single artist as a beginning with a beginning salary. Okay, and then we'll go over to back to Rosemary to
Keep it on this slide for now, Wendy, and then I'll mention when
Okay.
to go to the next one. Thank you. So as you can see, artists are not doing well in Alberta, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about why this is so for artists in general. We've already heard one person offer a perspective on this, but it also very much has to do with the atypical nature of the labor of artists and the income that artists receive. And labor is atypical in the sense that a lot of our work, this isn't true for all artists, but for many of us, a lot of our work, especially the creative side of it, it's invisible until we put it out there in the world. Also, we're usually artists as we're lifelong artists. It's not an occupation where we neatly retire at the age of 65. And then in terms of our income, very much unstable and very irregular. And this is because it may depend on where we are in our arts career, what stage of our career. It can also depend on what's going on in the cultural marketplace, what's wanted, what's desired, what's being paid for. And also a major thing is that in general, the arts are underfunded and many artists rely on grants, right, to move along, whether it's as writers, musicians, visual artists, etc. And this leads to a general situation of what's called precarity. This is a new term I've learned. This unstable, precarious situation for artists. And also, we need to recognize that for many artists, the way they're able to survive as musicians, as writers, as visual artists, they have to take on other work, not related to their practice. And that work is also often underpaid and is precarious. So there's a whole new term that's emerging in this discussion around basic income in the arts, where they're talking about not the proletariat, but the precariat, and that artists are part of the precariat. And, along with food service workers, assistants in nursing homes, etc., we lead a very precarious existence when it comes to income and labor. However, we also know, and we can go on to the next slide now, Wendy, that the artists as a group, we're not homogenous. And this is where it's important to employ an intersectional analysis. And basically, intersectionality is a framework for examining in a systemic way any form of oppression. For example, poverty and the situation of artists living in poverty. And it means examining it in a broad context and not through a single lens. And it very much emphasizes the multiple overlapping identities of individuals. And a key principle of intersectionality is that if we center the experiences of those who are most marginalized, we'll end up benefiting everybody. So the next table is a bit of an example of this. In 2020, a report came out. You can see the name there. I'm sorry, I have a visual impairment, so I can't read it myself, but it was about demographic diversity in the arts. It came out in 2020. It was based on 2016 statistics. And so you can see here what, how many artists there were in Canada at that time, what their median income was. And then when you look at artists who are women, or artists who are Indigenous, or artists who are racialized, they're earning often less than that median income for artists as a whole. Or in the case of women, quite a bit less than men. In the case of Indigenous artists, less than non-Indigenous artists, and racialized artists less than non-racialized artists. And of course, this is where other factors come into play, such as colonization, racism, sexism, heterosexism, you name it. It's about all those different forms of oppression. Unfortunately, the report said that statistics were not available in 2016 for those who were disabled or deaf, or who were members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community. And I think we need more research on that, so we have a better understanding of ourselves as an arts community and what's going on there. So we'll have questions at the end in case anyone has questions about this, but now I'm going to turn it back to Wendy to talk about basic income.
Okay, thanks, Rosemary. I just want to double check that you're seeing the slides. Yes?
Me or the audience?
The audience, yeah. Cynthia gave me a thumbs up. Okay. The
It's all very clear. It's all good.
Okay. The highlighted green box that I'm supposed to see around the slides is actually around my Zoom shot here. So I'm glad it's working the way it's supposed to. Okay, so go through just a few terms about basic income, and I wanted to talk about the guaranteed basic income first, which ensures that people on the lowest end of the economic spectrum receive the minimum guaranteed income, and the universal basic income would be the case where everybody, all Canadians, would receive the money and then sort it out with their taxes. And I tend to use the term basic income, and I tend to be referring to guaranteed basic income. However, WTEP and Basic Income Calgary, we're not policy makers, and we're just simply pushing or encouraging the idea of basic income, and not one specific option or another about whether it's guaranteed or universal basic income. But you will hear these terms in Canada. Okay. So basic income itself is where everyone has an income that's sufficient to meet basic needs and live with dignity, regardless of their work status. The basic needs would be housed, as others have mentioned this evening, is housing, food, clothing, winter boots, transportation, and other forms of communication. It would become a regular, predictable, universally and unconditionally available to all those who need it. There's different ways of presenting basic income, but in analogies, but it's like having a life jacket which helps people to stay afloat, or it could be like a safety harness to catch people if their income falls, or the equivalent of a hospital or a other large facility having a generator, so when the power fails. For people experiencing poverty, basic income can mean the difference between remaining stuck or having the chance to leave their poverty behind. And if work suddenly disappears, as might be the case for a couple of you, when you can no longer work for the multitude of reasons, you just don't lose everything. You can keep your basic needs met, so that there's hope for and possibilities of gaining your footing and not spending all your hard-earned savings to sustain yourself. Why do we need BI? One of the main reasons is to reduce the poverty levels, and as well as support income inequality. And one of the issues in Canada is that the wealthier are growing wealthier. And this is an example where the CEOs are making 243 times the average wage of Canadians. And the average wage of Canadians for 2022 was about $58,000 or $59,000 a year. Equal societies do work better, and they're better off. And we see less crime, better health, and people feel better about themselves and have a better well-being. There's better education and economic outcomes for the country. Basic income leads to healthier individuals. When money is not a factor, do people live longer and healthier? And the answer is yes. Income is far more influential on our health than it is the healthcare services, the genetics or lifestyle. And income means that there's more food security, meaning, and not maybe in this short term right now when food inflation, but more nutritious foods usually, and far fewer people using the food bank. There's less toxic stress and better living conditions. And certainly when people have commented tonight about how hard it is when housing is uncertain and you're uncertain on your next steps, that kind of day-to-day wear just adds to people's stress, and for some people does lead to health problems. And we know from 2021 statistics that 1 in 5 Albertans are food insecure, which is one of the highest rates in the country. Basic income encourages job security, entrepreneurship, and risk-taking. It can help people get through career transitions, as we're talking about AI, as well as the green transition. And it can help you change careers. It might allow more people to create small businesses. Basic income can also encourage compassion and artistic pursuits by having that minimum floor that people can choose to be artists. And then others can be compensated for unpaid labor, such as caregivers, all the volunteers in our communities, and parents and grandparents, and so on. The last reason why we need basic income is basic respect for human rights and dignity. Service providers such as charities and government social workers, they can switch from monitoring people and making sure they're spending the money on the right things or not earning too much money. They can switch over to focusing on their clients' complex needs, and they can begin to support their client effectively and refer them to supports and programs and counseling that will be helpful for them. And for those of you who have been on social assistance or Alberta Works, probably have had a few experiences where you're being monitored, especially for your income and how it's spent or how much additional money might be coming in. I'll switch now to the myths about basic income, and there's several that come up in common conversation. And oops, sorry, before that, Rosemary's going to provide a few comments about what a basic
Thank you.
for artists will do.
Checking my notes to see, am I supposed to go next or not?
Yes,
Thank you,
do.
Wendy. So some of the benefits are the same benefits that the population as a whole would experience in terms of stabilizing one's income, minimizing the ups and downs that many artists experience. Maybe you get grants one year, maybe you don't get them the next. Maybe you're selling work one year, not the next. Maybe you get gigs one year, not the next. And it's basically a cushion to help you through those ups and downs. And this in turn would mean, just as with the general population, much less stress, fewer mental health issues, less hustle for jobs that are not related to your practice. It would also mean more time. It would enable you to have more time for the creative process and for honing your craft. And we all know how important that is. And remember, that's the invisible, often the invisible part of the labor and the work that artists do. It would also provide more opportunities for professional development, for purchasing the tools of our craft, and also opportunities for collaborative work. J.D. Derbyshire, who has worked with Calgary Arts Development, she talked about how a basic income would enable artists, or all of us, to live lives with the value of curiosity, right? Because many artists operate from a place of curiosity of what's around them and being creative in terms of following that trail of curiosity and not worrying about, what is the marketplace going to value, but really pursuing and exploring, coming up with new ideas, being able to challenge the kind of mindset that was talked about earlier in our world. So I'm just, after having said that, I'll turn back to Wendy now to continue.
Okay, as promised, now for the myths. Okay, so one of the common ones is we can't afford basic income in Canada. But what people think, many people only see the money going out. They can't see where the benefit is. So as a study from the University of Saskatchewan has demonstrated that for every dollar that's spent on distributing money to Canadians, $1.06 savings would be achieved per year. And that's just 1 year. The savings would come from less use of health services, improved in rural development, less demand for shelters, and fewer incarcerated people. There would be more opportunities for people with what we see as positive things like high school completion, job retraining, which we've talked about before, and people exploring their arts and cultural interests and career opportunities, and as well as for agriculture. There is a considerable concern and gap about the aging farming population. And this is just 1 year, but if you're in a family that has a basic income, the benefit to the children with just generally better food, or perhaps some of the money being being able to spend it on kids' recreation programs or a Saturday education program where they can learn and grow and flourish in different ways as well. So those have long-term benefits that are not being quantified and captured by this $6. Probably one of the top myths is people won't work if they have enough money. And would they work? And the answer is yes, they do work. Studies in Manitoba and Ontario, including Ontario, it was in 2018, 2019, several United States locations and several countries around the world show that people who are given money, enough for basic income, does not result in fewer people working. Employment rates and unemployment rates are staying the same. And the money is not, that would be given on basic income is not so high that that it becomes a disincentive to work, but it is higher than the current social assistance rates in Alberta. A third myth is that people will spend their basic income on alcohol and drugs. And there's plenty of research, again, from around the world and even here in Canada, from our other income security programs, that people spend the money on education, including more on tuition fees, computer equipment, food, childcare, transportation, and recreation, as I mentioned earlier. This money is spent in the community. And we know this because of the programs that are in Canada that we have our basic income like, such as the Canada Child Benefit, Old Age Security, and the Senior Guaranteed Income Supplement. Well, the other argument becomes, well, why don't you just go out and get a job? And this is often said to young adults. And this is October 23 unemployment rates in Alberta with 15 to 24-year-olds who are not in school or university or post-secondary schools do have higher unemployment rates than older adults. And young adult males remain the highest group of unemployment. And since I've been doing this presentation, this is a common feature that it's 2.5 to 3 times the unemployment rate for young men than it is for other groups. Automation and as well as AI, artificial intelligence, are eliminating many skilled jobs, and an income allows them to retrain. The other issue with basic income, or anyone who wants to work can work, is that there's still a mismatch between people's skills and their actual skills versus the jobs that are available to them. So as an example, 26% of men and women who have immigrated to Canada and have been educated outside of Canada are working in jobs where they're overqualified. Can we afford it? And how can the government pay for it? Is yes, we can. And this is from data from 2017 income in Canada. The purple line shows the income in Canadian income levels in 2017. The green line is what would be proposed if basic income is implemented. And you can see that with the lowest 2 groups or deciles over on the left, that there would be a substantial increase to the family income from zero, no income, up to about, I think it's about $25,000 on this. You would see a substantial increase in the family income or person's income. And as it goes up, basic income and would still be continued to be paid until we reach the median deciles. And it's only with the upper income levels, the top two deciles, that over on the right, where we would see people being taxed enough to pay for part of basic income. So that's one model for income distribution that would help pay for the program. There are other models, including basic income being the income coming from taxing wealthy, the financial transactions on wealthy portfolios, taxing financial institutions, and having fewer tax breaks for large companies. Okay, a couple more slides. As I mentioned, we're advocates for basic income. We are not saying that this model, the previous slide, was the way to go, but it's one way that the model can be created. But there was a consensus statement from all the basic income advocacy groups across Canada, and these are the criteria that we'd like to see when I'm very optimistic, when a basic income program is implemented in Canada, that it's available to all Canadian and resident adults, including permanent residents and refugees, that it be adequate for a decent lifestyle, and provide for housing, food, clothing, communication, and transportation. It's based on taxable income, which probably a lot of us are all too familiar with, and paid to individuals, although the income might be shifted based on household income and family size. And in addition, that it would be adjusted, it could be adjusted quickly to rapidly changing family circumstances. People will have no behavioral requirements. They won't be required to go to school or to work or to show that they've applied for a certain number of jobs. And the application process would be as easy as possible, especially for people with disabilities. The core elements, in addition, is looking at the government's role in creating a basic income program, especially what's available right now in our discussions. We want a program where the federal, provincial, territorial, and Indigenous people are working together and collaborating together. The federal government should have legislation which establishes basic income as a right. And municipal governments do have roles with this. And I'll just shorten the other three comments. They're basically that all our social services, health, or education supports that we do have in place in Canada would stay in place, and new programs would be developed. And I just think of examples like right now of the dental care that's being rolled out, and also the plan for pharmacare to be rolled out. Even with basic income, we want these programs to continue to be developed and implemented in Canada. Okay, so this is the point where we can stop for about 10 minutes and take a break. So Margot.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Wendy, and Rosemary and Cynthia. So far, very informative, and so we will take that break. And Carolyn has put the survey into the chat. So if you could please take a couple of minutes, go to that link, fill out the form, and it's one way of reaching us and letting you know, pardon me, letting us know what's important to you. So let's see, it's just after 8 o'clock. We'll come back at about 8:10 and start again.
Okay, and if people have any questions, they're welcome to put them in the chat at this time too.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely, please.
Thank you very much. We'll give everybody another minute.
It's getting late.
Well,
Mhm.
10 after 8.
Mm.
Okay. I think possibly all or most of you are back now. Thank you, any of you who took the time to fill out the survey. And now I will pass you back over to who's going to start now, Rosemary or Wendy?
Rosemary.
Rosemary, okay. Take
Right.
it away, Rosemary.
Thank you so much. So what I wanted to talk about now was the political situation in Canada in regards to basic income. As we've already mentioned, We're Together Ending Poverty is part of Basic Income Calgary, which is a network of different agencies and organizations working to promote basic income. In turn, Basic Income Calgary is part of Basic Income Alberta. Basic Income Alberta and Basic Income Calgary are connected to national organizations such as Coalition Canada, Basic Income, the Basic Income, National Basic Income Network. So all across the country, there are groups like ours that collaborate at provincial and national levels, and they've all been working to promote basic income, to lobby politicians, to educate others. So this is what's been going on. And as a result of a lot of that work, we see several things happening. And so if we start at the national level, first of all, in 2019, the final report on murdered and missing Indigenous women in Canada included call 4.5 for a guaranteed livable annual income. And so that was a key call for justice. And in that report as a whole, the whole issue of economic marginalization was highlighted over and over as one of the pathways to violence for Indigenous women. In 2020, 3,000 artists across Canada and something like 300 different art organizations wrote or signed a letter that was addressed to the Prime Minister calling for a basic income program for the arts. Then in 2022, we had a bill presented to the House of Commons, Bill C-223, and it was presented by Leah Gazan, the NDP MP for Winnipeg Centre. And subsequently, that same bill was then introduced by Senator Kim Pate into the Senate. And the name of the bill is an act to develop a national framework for a guaranteed livable basic income. And where those two bills sit right now, my understanding is that the one in the House of Commons is still in second reading. We haven't had any update beyond that. But for the one in the Senate, it actually passed second reading and is before the Senate Finance Committee. And the Senate Finance Committee recently held hearings, bringing basic income advocates, economists, and others to come and talk to them about that framework, about basic income. And we're waiting to see whether or not the Senate Finance Committee will approve the bill, send it back for a third reading. And if it passes that, then it goes over to the House of Commons to go through a similar process. And the national coalitions and groups have tried to mobilize people across the country. Basic Income Calgary, Wendy especially with Basic Income Calgary, developed a letter writing campaign encouraging people, and I'm sure we got back to EAR and other organizations with whom we've done presentations and sharing circles to ask people to please write into the Senate Finance Committee expressing why they feel a basic income is important. Some people sent formal briefs, but for others, it could just be letters talking about your personal experience. So that was a way we try and circle back to people we've worked with to engage them in that political process. So that's where those bills sit right now. Also, in 2020, I think something like 50 or 60 senators said they approved of basic income, 40 MPs. And in terms of political parties, both the Liberals and the Greens have actually passed, this is national political parties, have passed resolutions supporting basic income. One was presented at an NDP convention, but it was never voted on. And if you know anything about how conventions work, they have long lists of resolutions and they get prioritized. And this one didn't make it to the top of the list, so it wasn't even considered. When we go to the provincial level, is this the slide for the provinces, Wendy? I can't hear Wendy. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I remember I can't see them and it didn't come through earlier for me to look at. So I'll just skip Alberta and talk about and Quebec. Although to come back to Alberta, one thing to point out is that, yeah, the UCP has no interest in basic income. The NDP did, at one of their conventions, they did discuss a motion that was presented by MLA Joe Ceci on basic income. But I don't know what the outcome of that discussion was. I don't know what the vote was. I don't know if amendments were made to it. And we'll be finding out more about that and getting back to it. But the exciting news comes from Prince Edward Island, where in 2020, an all-party committee was set up at the provincial level to look at how could they reduce poverty in PEI. And the consensus of these parties was that the province needed a basic income program and they needed to collaborate with the federal government in terms of how such a program would be financed. However, the federal government didn't really move on it, didn't really respond to this request. So as a result, Coalition Canada Basic Income set up a committee, and it was composed of retired MPs from all three federal parties, MLAs from all three parties at the provincial level, economists, as well as basic income advocates. And they worked for over a year to develop a proposal on for a demonstration project on basic income in PEI. And we just found out that today that report was released. We haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but UBI, Universal Basic Income, they sent out a little news release on it. They're quite excited about it. And it's called a proposal for a guaranteed basic income benefit for PEI. And while I don't know the details, I know that in general, after discussions with Bruce Stanton, one of the former Conservative MPs who worked on this, it does include several of the core elements that Wendy talked about earlier. So we're quite excited about this. We can't wait to actually see the report itself and go through it with a fine-tooth comb. But I know that for UBI, they're hoping it could be a model, right, for the rest of the country and other provinces. Okay, so that's the provincial level. I'm sorry, I have low vision and I'm trying to catch up with my notes here. Right, so I already talked about that. Then at the municipal level, We have cities all across Canada who have passed resolutions at city council level asking the provincial and federal governments for basic income. They've been actively advocating for basic income. And BC, the Federation of BC Municipalities, in other words, all of the municipalities in BC advocated for basic income. A lot of provinces in the Maritimes have advocated. Many cities in the Maritimes have advocated for basic income, several in Ontario. And right now, and Wendy can talk more about this, in terms of Calgary, Basic Income Calgary has been reaching out to different city councilors, and slowly but surely, several are coming on board. They would support such a resolution, and one councilor is prepared to help us, develop the wording of the resolution and to present it. And we're just waiting for a few more councilors. We don't want to bring it forward until we're pretty sure it would pass. But that's what's going on at the city level. But then internationally, there have been some exciting programs. We've talked about them before in past workshops here, but these are programs specific to artists. And so you have other countries like Ireland, or you have states like New York State in America, city of San Francisco, where they understand the value of the cultural sector, not only to the economy, but to society as a whole. Someone earlier talked about, they can't afford these exorbitant tickets to attend music events. And so we all know culture plays such an important role in people's lives. And if you just stopped and thought about what it would mean not to have a cultural sector, our lives would be very empty at many levels, and it would have quite a negative impact on the economy. So you had countries like Ireland that really understood, again, the value of the cultural sector, and they were very worried about the impact of the pandemic. They felt that what the pandemic exposed was the vulnerability, right? The precarity that I talked about for the cultural sector. And so as you can see by this slide, they instituted a program where something like 2,000 artists would receive $1,400 a month for 3 years. And as of April 23, that started in October 22. And as of April 23, artists are being asked to record what the impact of that has been on their lives and their art practice. And this information will be gathered. And they've also set up a control group of another 1,000 artists who are not receiving a basic income payment to also talk about what's going on in their lives. And the hope of the Arts Council in Ireland is that they'll gain the data they need to actually create a model for supporting artists into the future. That it should not just be at the times of extreme vulnerability, like with a pandemic, but that the cultural sector in general needs far more stable support in the long term. So that's quite exciting. And the same kind of motivation led to a program in San Francisco in 2020, where it was $1,000 a month it ended up being a total of 180 artists for 18 months. We don't have any information on what the impact of that was. And then New York State, again, $1,000 a month to 200 artists across the state. And what's interesting about their program is they were really paying attention to those intersectional issues and looking at systemic barriers that are faced by some artists. And again, their thinking in New York State is very similar. Can this be a model for the future for supporting the arts? So I think that's really significant. And I just wish our own country valued arts to the same extent and had the same kind of sensitivity and sensibility around the needs of artists and the importance of culture to our society as a whole. So I'm now going to turn everything back over to Cynthia, who wants to present some information about housing and housing affordability in Canada and Calgary.
Thank you, Rosemary. So I'm like Rosemary said, I'm going to be talking about affordable housing. And with affordable housing, I will be talking about the Canadian and the Calgary housing strategy, especially the one that was presented in September. So I'll start with the Canadian one, Canada one. So Canada first ever national housing strategy, the NHS, was introduced in 2017. NHS, it's a 10-year plan with a budget of $82 plus billion. The strategy aimed to ensure Canadians have access to affordable and sustainable housing. The strategy set ambitious goal, including removing 53,000 families from housing needs and reducing chronic homelessness by 50% over the next decade. So that's the plan. That's the overall plan. So the NHS involves collaborating with various partners, including provinces, territories, municipality, private and non-profit sectors, and a commitment to a nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous people. So they emphasize the importance of housing for vulnerable population and they introduce a new program like the National House Co-Investment Fund and the Canadian Community Housing Initiative. This strategy includes measure to address systemic barriers, such as creating a federal housing advocate, a national housing council, a community-based tenants initiative, and a public engagement campaign. So they highlight that $15.9 billion will go to the $50.9 billion National Housing Co-Investment Fund, and which aim to create new housing units, repair existing ones, and promote inclusive communities. The strategy also commits to allocate at least 25% of other investments to projects benefiting women, girls, and their family. Specific goals include creating shelter space for survivors of family violence, affordable unit for senior and people with development disability, and transferring federal land to housing providers. The Canadian Community Housing Initiative, $4.3 billion investment to renew support for province and territory in managing community housing. It introduced the $500 million federal community housing initiative to stabilize federal administered community housing, and $4 billion Canada Housing Benefit. It's planned to offer affordable housing. So the $4 billion Canada Housing, it's what goes to different provinces, and the Canadian government is asking for each province to match that number. So that is for the affordable housing. So it also highlights the Canadian government commitment to addressing veteran homelessness and improving housing conditions for Indigenous population. It includes investment in veteran access to affordable housing and partnering with First Nation, Inuit, and Métis nations for distinction-based housing strategy. So that was the Canadian housing strategy. And then I'm going to be, just looking at this chart here. So the first chart, the one on your left, the circle, it's a national housing strategy. So that is pretty much a breakdown of where the $82+ billion. And then on your right is it's the 10-year plan. This is what the Canadian government is planning to do in that 10-year plan that they are hoping to achieve. So the Calgary housing strategy, so that happened, so that was in September. So that happened in September. So according to the Calgary housing strategy, around 85,000 households currently need an affordable housing options. The percentage of households lacking affordable housing has remained constant at 17 to 18% over the past 3 decades. However, with the population, Calgary population growing rapidly, this number is going to be the number of households requiring affordable housing will increase to nearly 100,000 by 2026. That is in 2 years. By 2026, 100,000 family will be needing affordable housing. That is a big number. So you're probably asking, so what is the Calgary plan to keep up with the new demands? So I will tell you guys about the new strategy. So the strategy has 6 categories. And this strategy, this plan is a 7-year plan. So it is from 2003 to, well, the end of 2003 till 2030. So the first category, it's make it easier to build houses. So the plan is to cancel single detached special policy area. So for those who did not know it, I didn't know it until I read this. So a single detached policy area is a policy area tool that was introduced to allow for area within a community to limited development to a single detached housing for farm, as long as they are not located in or near a transit station area, main street or active center. So single detached housing, so there was law limiting single detached housing. So the plan is to cancel that policy. And then the next category will be make more lands available. So the Calgary House strategy allocated 20 million annually to the Housing Land Fund for non-market housing. Non-market housing, it's rental and affordable housing and everything like that. And then the third category will be meet the need of Indigenous people and equally deserving population. So they allocated 10 million annually for organization providing housing to Indigenous people and equity deserving population. So for that, Rosemary told me about 6 million will go into the Indigenous population. And then utilizing the Housing Land Fund to give land to Indigenous housing providers. The next category will be facilitating creating collaboration. So the plan is to connect developers and non-profit housing providers for affordable housing partnership. The next one, increase investment in housing providers. Enact bylaw exempting non-profit housing providers from municipal property tax. So exempting the property tax on non-profile housing. Ensuring more people, so the next one, will be ensuring more people have a safe place to call home. So the last one. So the plan is to support existing programs related to affordable housing and homelessness. Advocate for revision to the Residence Tenancy Act to protect against eviction. Provide financial support for temporary accommodation and create a housing create a housing sorry, accommodation. Yes, sorry about that. That was a mistake. Sorry. So the plan, so their target is to build 3,000 new non-marketing housing per year, and 1,000 more market home per year, more than the previous year. So they're planning to build 1,000 more than the year before. So that was the Calgary housing strategy that was passed, that was approved in September. That was proposed and then approved in September. So yeah, so one of the flaws, so a couple of the flaws that I found into both housing strategy were, so I found that both strategy emphasize on funding and constructions more than seeking to fix the issues. And the issues, like we are presenting basic income, the plan is to build a lot of houses, but like if people cannot afford them, even like if people cannot afford them, they're just gonna be there, like they're just going to be empty, like people are like won't be able to afford them. It's going to be hard for people to, you know, like to afford them. But like at this point, you know, like I'm talking to many people and they're saying at this point in my life, I have to decide between food or my rent. I have to decide between feeding my family and paying my rent, you know? So if they are focusing more on building than trying to bring out, you know, like the cost of living, it's still gonna be hard for people to afford their lives. And then the last one will be the lack of rent regulation. And I believe somebody talked about like the worry that they are going to lose the place. And this is one of the things, you know, like they talk about, you know, that the Calgary housing strategy talk about like a rent regulation and everything, but like it didn't look like it was it wasn't a lot of like they didn't talk a lot about it. Like it wasn't like something that they were focusing more about it. And I know that after talking to so many people, I know that many people are going through that where they are worried of like having to move out and everything. So yeah, so I think that's something that they really need to look into that. And then so yeah, so there are different organizations in the city that are advocating for affordable housing. So I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of a detail of a couple of them. One of them is WTEP. And we have Acorn, we have the Marlborough Indigenous Women's Group. So those are grassroots organizations in the city that are actively fighting for and educating the community on the issues of affordable housing. These organizations don't just advocate for the community, advocate for affordable housing, but they also address issues such as rent control and tenant right through community organizing and campaign. Sorry about that. They focus on supporting marginalized population in our community and addressing unique housing challenges. Additionally, they urge the government to enact a new and improved law that safeguard tenants' rights and housing rights. So I just want you guys to know that these grassroots organizations that I talk about, they are just like a beginning work. So it's just a beginning work. They are just started doing this type of work, and they are working really hard, like day and night, to bring awareness to this situation. And one of the main goal, it is to make sure that the government and everybody know that housing, it's a human right. It is not something, it is a human right. It's something that we have to have. And yes, that is my part. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks, Cynthia, for providing an overview of the complexity of housing and funding affordable housing. So now it's time for questions or discussion. And if you have any questions or points you would like to raise, you can either post a question in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. And to see the chat. I just have to stop the slides for a sec, okay?
It looks like we haven't actually got any questions in the chat, but feel free to ask questions right now. I actually have one to start with if nobody else does.
Go for it, Marco.
Okay, I have a question. I think it was somewhere in the very first couple of slides. There was a term, or you were talking about comparing the incomes of I think artists and income support, and there was something like a market basket.
Right.
And I wanted to know what is that? What is that? Something market basket.
Yeah, it's called the market basket measure. And I'm sorry, I didn't explain that. The
That's
MBM, it's data collected by Stats Canada about how much it costs to live in different Canadian places. And the market basket measure value that I gave there of around $56,000, that was for Calgary. And so it focuses on housing, well, it includes housing, food, clothing, transportation.
Is that just for one individual or for a family?
That's a family of four.
Family of four, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, yeah, it's yeah, an interesting amount. And I think a family of four would still be, and that was 2022 costs as well. So we all have to keep in mind what was happening a year and a half ago in how much things cost. And I appreciate how fast things are changed, and we tend to forget what it was like in 2022.
Well, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions? I'm sure people must have questions about what's going on. I wondered, I know I have lots.
Okay.
I was also wondering with the information that you have put together about like what Cynthia was talking about with housing, there are a lot of programs that are like in development to help people over time. But I'm wondering if anything has come up that's a lot more immediate, because I remember when I first I moved here in September, and I remember listening to the radio. I think it was in August when a lot of the students were coming to the city, and there were also just an enormous amount of people coming to Calgary in droves from Vancouver and Toronto, and the housing prices were flying upward, and the student housing, all the student dorms and housing were 100% full for the first time ever. And as school was approaching, there were students living in their cars. And I've been thinking about them and thinking, well, maybe that happened here and there before in the past, but now it's like it's become almost a normal thing that happens. And I'm just wondering, what's happening to those people now? Are there more housing units opening up in anywhere to house anybody who's become more vulnerable due to the situation?
I don't think so, because you have the city encouraging people who have rooms in their homes that say they're not using all the time to rent them out to students and others. So I don't think a lot of new housing has been made available. One recent project, though, that did come to fruition was that the Aboriginal Friendship Center of Calgary excuse me, applied for funding from the province, which in turn receives funding from the feds for housing. And with that money, they've just built an elders lodge. So it's a lodge for Indigenous seniors, elders. who need subsidized housing. And what was important about it was that the cultural component and what living there would mean for enabling people to keep in touch with their culture, engage in cultural activities, ceremony, etc. I mean, that's just one small project. And I think right now only 12, you know, it's enough housing for 12 elders, but it's an example of what Cynthia was talking about in terms of how nonprofits and developers, etc., can come together and work on these projects. But is it working fast enough? I don't think so.
Well, that's why I was forced out of the city, and I know I'm just one example. And the thing is, like I said, I was forced out, but I was fairly lucky where I ended up. But I think there are thousands of people out there who are really struggling and you know, like really having to choose between food and rent. I mean, that's terrible.
Another thing that the students may be doing is crowding apartments. So a 1-bedroom apartment might be home for 3 or 4 students.
Yeah.
Or maybe Cynthia has some other comments as an active university student that they're being very creative, and other students might be just virtually couch surfing, and they'll stay with one friend or a relative for a few weeks and move on, keep moving around.
I think that the whole notion of a number of students living in a house to share expenses, that's been happening forever. That's always been a thing. But the fact that there isn't even enough space for even that to happen for everybody, you know, living in their cars, who knows, and people having to hold 3 and 4 jobs while they're going to school. I mean, here we're focusing on students, so that this is just one part of the problem, but it's a good indicator because it's sort of things that are happening to these students. They're kind of vocal about it, and so it stands up in high relief. But what about other, you know, older single people, and what about families? You know, it's terrifying.
Yes, and certainly I think the Vibrant Community Calgary had released a report about the number of Calgarians that were in precarious circumstances and could become homeless.
Yeah.
And it's a high number. I think it was 80,000 or 100,000. Like literally one check not coming in a month can make a huge difference to them being housed to unhoused.
And I would like to just want to say one more thing, and then Gavin will get you. And I just want to add something to everything that I've been saying and what we've all been saying. But all of this aside, we're just damn lucky that we don't have any kind of war situation going on here. We I mean, we have a lot of disorder and mismanagement and ridiculousness happening, which is making life hard enough. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we do still have somewhat privilege here because we're not in the middle of a war. So that's all I want to say.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's a good point. Gavin.
Yes.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. You doing better? You doing all right?
Oh, well, mostly.
Yeah. I have a question for Cynthia. I have an observation, and then I took a couple notes. Do you guys just mind me pontificating for a moment?
Sure, we'll give you a few minutes.
Sure. So Cynthia, I'm curious, by housing, do you mean rental housing? Or do you mean ownership?
Oh, good question.
Sorry, what do you mean by housing?
When you're saying housing, do you mean rental housing or do you mean ownership?
Like, is the government building housing for people to buy or housing units that people can rent, like in an apartment building?
Oh, sorry. When I'm saying housing, I mean like everything in in like everything, like rental, like sell, like for people to own and everything. I mean everything together. The only time when I separate them was when I was talking about the, sorry, oh, where's my notes? When I was talking about the the nonprofit housing. That's when I was separating them. But like when I say housing, I was talking about in general.
Okay,
Yes.
so they're building housing that people could afford enough to buy. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the plan. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's good news. My observation is that it seems to me, and I may be incorrect, but it seems like I'm the only dude here tonight, which I just find very interesting. If such is the case, I haven't seen another gentleman in here this evening,
There's
or some.
there's two of you.
There's two of us. Well, I'm glad we're represented. The observations, I don't know if I'll get into them too much. Cynthia, if I can just go back to you for a second, you're quite sure about the ownership part of this housing that is being created, yeah?
Yeah. It was in the strategy that was presented in September.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that there would be that you could rent own, or that you could just outright buy, or because we know the crisis in home ownership right now.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering how when no one can buy how would we say it, an antiquated home, how is it that they could afford to buy a new home?
So we were talking about that actually this morning with me and Rosemary. It's like, I guess their idea is the more houses they build, the more it's gonna at the end it's gonna be affordable for people. So
Okay,
their plan is to build a lot of houses. Like their plan is to build a lot of houses and then break many barriers that are like harder for people to build houses. They even have they are planning. I can't remember the number, but they even set a budget of building more residents in downtown Calgary, and they're trying to they're trying to like bring more, like, yeah, so just like bringing more houses in the city.
Okay, and so if I'm getting what you're saying that they would rent them until there is the option to buy them. Would that be more correct, or?
Oh no, that's not. I don't think that's what this meant. So what they're saying is, they want to keep up with the population of Calgary. The population of Calgary is because it's growing so fast. They want to start building more houses. So for those, it's divided into different categories. One category will be houses for people to buy, and then the other category will be for people will be houses that people can rent. So they have. I think I gave the number. They have a number of how many houses. So yeah, so 3,000 houses will be yearly. 3,000 houses will be for rental. And like affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And then 1,000 will be in the market of like selling homes and all that.
Okay, so that would still be sort of what right now is like a person that can't afford it wouldn't probably be able to own a home. They would have to rent their home, correct?
Yes.
It seems like that to me. Okay.
Yes,
I just wanted to get
how it seems like that to me too. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to get a little bit of clarification on that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Thank you
No
for
problem.
that. Yeah, I mean, I've written a lot of notes, but I don't want to take a lot of time. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you know if there's anything being done about rent control, about, how much a person can charge for rent? Like what's going on with that?
No, the provincial government has made it clear that they are not interested in rent control. You have an incredibly strong landlord lobby here in the province. The only group that's really pushing for it, WTEP has always supported it, but ACORN is the tenants' rights group. They've been on the street demonstrating. They've had a lot of media coverage where they've been advocating for rent control. But it's until you can get enough people, right, supporting it, the government just doesn't want to listen.
Oh,
Yeah.
so we need more support. I see that you've put the link in the chat.
Yes.
So we
yeah,
can
put
click
Acorn
on
in.
that and find a way to help support that.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
I
Absolutely.
suppose if you don't mind, can I just say one more thing? It's in direct correlation with what we're speaking about now, and that is how to activate a populace. Especially those like and this may be the $1 million question or just the $5 question for most people, and that is, how do we engage the populace, the population, those who do suffer and are maybe embarrassed by such, or their lives are so so full of other things, like not creating music, but working at 7-Eleven until 5 and then going to a second job and never creating. How do
Yeah.
we activate people? How do we get people sufficiently, I don't want to say upset or aggravated, but understanding? I mean, there's a certain swath of us here, but um, a very few group of individuals here tonight. How has there been any thought as to how to engage the populace and to help them to understand that their lives do matter, that the population, that the demos does matter in this case? I mean, that is the definition of democracy. So I'm curious.
I think a group like Acorn, their approach is they have what they call chapters. There's one in the Beltline, one in I think the Forest Lawn area, and they do things like they go door to door. Their idea is to organize tenants, right? To organize the people who are most impacted by these issues, and it's a long, slow, and hard process, but they're doing it, and part of it, I think, is going to where people are. Like we often sit in our organizations hoping people will come to us, but we need to find ways to get out to where people live and create events that people do want to come to, and to find out what people need. But it's a long, slow process. It's a community development process. And unfortunately, in this city, community development comes under the purview of, community and neighborhood social services. And you have some excellent social workers who are out there working with groups like the Marlboro Indigenous Women's Collective, but you have others who, I mean, they get smacked. They get smacked on the hand if they get into any kind of advocacy work. And the social worker I'm thinking of, and she's always pushing the envelope on, in fact, what they can do that's community development. Because if you have effective community development, you have people challenging, right? City policy, et cetera, provincial policy, federal policy. And social workers are funded by the city. So it's complex.
Yeah.
Well, and this is really the problem, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about institutional power in this case that holds the individual back from taking
Mhm.
their rights and their God-given human right to property and to basic standard of living, right?
Mhm.
So this, and I do see this in these types of power structure. I mean, just anecdotally, but I think it's important. Like I said, I run a podcast, and I had certain individuals from certain organizations slated to come on. One of them pretty much ran me around for 2 years, and they didn't show up at the end of it. I won't go into that. One of the other individuals from an institution that will remain nameless did show up, and the individual within 5 minutes said they are leaving and they're not going to stay. And I had another guy from Basic Income Calgary standing right next to me at the time. Not to go into it too deeply, but terminology such as stakeholders, not able to talk, um, uh, things of this nature. And it basically became almost, the individual almost started suffering a psychosis to the point that I had to lead them upstairs and out the door and really, really benevolently try to appeal to their heart, of which they would have nothing to do. And I let them go. I mean, I had to. I was actually in that moment, they were saying, you have to let me go. And I'm like, well, I'm not keeping you here. You can go anytime you want. And they also intimated that they don't answer to me. And I did have to recoil from that. And I said, no, you do actually answer to me, and you don't actually answer to me. You actually answer to every brother, sister, and anybody else, whatever they consider themselves in this city. And they could not understand that. They could not grab a hold of their actual job description. That because they had stakeholders, because they had these things, they were unwilling to engage with the demos. And I found that very disconcerting, although I also felt, I had some concern for them in the moment because they were basically hyperventilating and really not knowing what to do. It was quite astounding, but I won't go into it. Regardless, it's these kinds of things I think that we fight. And by engaging the populace and the demos and, the people that these things affect, I think it's very important that the word gets out to them and that some sort of coalition is met out, as difficult as that is. And I took down the name Acorn, and I think I will at least petition them. So
Click on the link and follow through to their site.
yeah,
I need to interrupt everybody right now. Thank you so much for everything that you've brought to this discussion, Gavin. It's after 9 now, just after 9. So our time is up. I want to thank everybody for a very informative evening. And thank you for bringing this rich sort of quilt of this sort of panorama of what's happening here and across the city and even places in the world, how people are coping. And I know the idea of basic income has been popping its head up, especially because of the pandemic and since then. So maybe that gives us a little bit of hope. But yeah. The slides that you have created, are they something that that would be available to well, it'll be in the recording.
Yes, yeah, they're in the recording. So if some of I don't know if the chat would be where I've included a few links for organizations like Acorn and the Senate letter writing campaign. Which, back to Gavin's point, how do you activate people? Another way is letter writing campaigns to politicians. And
sure.
That tends to be the way we do it for basic income. And housing tends to be more on the street activism and demonstrations.
Okay.
But I want to thank you, Ear, for organizing us and giving us an opportunity again to chat with artists and help get the word out. It truly is appreciated.
Well, it's great to have you guys here every year, and this year it seems to be more meaningful than ever. So thank you so much. And if before we shut this down, if you guys go to the chat and the links that have been provided, one for Acorn, Wendy has put in a link for Acorn and also one for the Senate letter writing campaign. And you can click on the blue links and they'll come up as tabs on your in your device.
Yeah, when the meeting closes, we can access those links.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Rosemary and Cynthia and everyone else for attending. It's been a really informative discussion. I think we could go on for another couple hours here. There's so much more to talk about. But once again, thank you so much from Ear.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, everybody have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions. There were a couple in there, but actually just a couple of comments. Somebody was talking about their rent and their there weren't really questions. It's
just comments on rough rental situations. Mhm.
Yes. So anyway, have a good night.
Okay, bye now.
Thank you. Take
We
care.
hope you'll come back next year again.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
So
we'll
how
have
do
BI by then.